In this video, we're going to talk about the disappearance of A-26 Invader 4322424 and her crew. Let's start with some context. In 1942, the 47th Bombardment Group began attacking Axis bases and supplies all over the Mediterranean and North Africa. On the 11th of December, 47th Bomb Group gets orders to move to a new base in Grosseto, Italy. They also get word that their aging A-20 Havocs will be replaced immediately with A-26 Invaders. The 47th Bomb Group couldn't fly back to the US and get the planes, or that would take pressure off the Axis forces in the area, so the Invaders had to be brought to the front. Among the units assigned to this task was the 33rd Ferry Squadron. The 33rd Ferry Squadron was part of the 556th Army Air Base Unit, which in turn was part of the 6th Ferry Group. The 33rd Ferry Squadron was responsible for ferrying the A-26 Invaders from the US bases to England and the Mediterranean. One of the planes that was assigned to go to the 47th Bomb Group was serial number 4322424. This plane was an A-26 B-20DT model and was built at the Douglas, Tulsa, Oklahoma plant in late November 1944. Unfortunately, I don't have an image of this specific plane that can be definitively identified, but this plane pictured is of the same type. It is currently unclear how the plane got from Tulsa, Oklahoma to the Army airfield at Morriston, Florida, but in early December, the plane arrived at Florida and was slated to be flown to Italy. The northern route to Italy, flying over Europe, would take the planes dangerously close to German positions. So instead, the planes were flown from South America. Then they would go across the Atlantic to bases in North Africa and on to Italy. To accomplish this long voyage without having to stop for fuel, a special fuel tank was fitted into the planes that took up the entire bomb bay, which would give the planes much greater range. A 3-man crew was put together for the ferry mission. First Lieutenant Charles A. Grimes would fly the plane, assisted by First Lieutenant Laverne Gaylord Dingwell as the navigator. Sergeant Norman Robert Bob Smith would act as the in-flight engineer and gunner. On the 13th of December 1944, Bob Smith wrote home to his family, letting everyone know that he would be deployed for a while, but he didn't say where. He doesn't realize it at the time, but this would be the last letter that he ever wrote. On the 14th of December, Bob's letter gets mailed out, and the plane, 4322424, takes off from Morriston, Florida, and flies to Belém, Brazil without incident. On the 15th of December, the plane is to fly the next leg of the trip from Belém, Brazil to Natal, Brazil. Natal is a coastal airbase and the jump-off point for the flight to the Mediterranean. This leg of the trip is 963 miles and should take just over 3 hours. The plane takes off from Belém at 12:34 local time, or 15:34 Greenwich Mean Time, and is never seen again. Roughly 300 miles away is the first of the radar check-in outposts at São Luís, Brazil. This outpost reported no contact with the plane by radio or radar. We can then deduce that whatever happened to the plane must have happened fairly shortly after takeoff, and almost certainly within the first hour of flight. Since neither the base at Belém nor the outpost at São Luís ever heard from the plane, we can further deduce that whatever happened to it may have happened so quickly that no one had time to radio back to the base or call Mayday. 12 weeks after the plane disappeared, a letter dated 7th March 1945, the father of Sergeant Bob Smith wrote to the commander of the 6th Ferry Group asking for more details. This letter prompted a formal review, which generated the missing aircrew report number 14085, which is the source of this video. From this report, we can learn a few more details. The report says, shortly after takeoff, the aircraft was given final flight instructions and then cleared from control tower frequency. All radio ground stations in this region are alerted when the plane is reported overdue, but are unable to make contact with the aircraft. Captain Henry A.L. Gildred, the officer who wrote the report, comments further. Route between Belém and next control station at São Luís is covered by thick impenetrable jungle. It is the opinion of this accident board at this station that if the plane crashed, it is presumed to be down in this jungle. Although it doesn't spell it out in the report, we can assume that some kind of search mission was undertaken. Mr. Smith makes it a point to mention that he was getting regular updates for a while. He says, "We, his family, were grateful for the daily telegrams advising of the progress of the search of our missing boy." But that's where the information ends. To this day, the plane nor the bodies of the crew have ever been recovered. There are a few things that stick out to me, and a few possible explanations as to what could become of the plane, and there are many questions that are left unanswered. It is my assertion, due to the complete lack of response from the plane, whatever became of it, the outcome was sudden and decisive. The invaders of this time period had a fairly common issue with engine trouble. There are numerous accident reports citing engine failure as the cause of a crash, and many logs where planes had to abort the bombing run due to engine trouble. Based on this, the chances that the plane succumbing to an engine trouble seem relatively high. If that's the case and the plane suffered engine trouble, why didn't the pilot or the navigator radio back to report the issue? Brazil was not an active war zone, so there was no danger of giving away the location to the enemy, and there'd be no need to maintain radio silence. If there was engine trouble, the pilot may have decided he could just turn around and go back to base, and may not have attempted a radio call. If the plane was sufficiently low to the ground, a sudden drop in altitude may have resulted in a crash where there was no time for the crew to escape or take other actions. Page 92 of the A-26 Invader pilot manual says, if the pilots can make shallow turns to or away from the dead engine. However, the pilot training video that's part of the curriculum at transition school, Captain Saunders tells the pilots to not turn into the dead engine, as this could cause the invader to fall out of the sky. This is exactly what happened with disastrous results to Invader 4139241, but I'll cover that in a different video. A lingering question for me is why there isn't any trace of the original plane. Surely if the plane crashed intact into the jungle, the plane would have broken a hole into the huge canopy of vegetation, revealing where it crashed. According to the report, there is no evidence of this. Also, if the plane crashed intact, why was there no fire? Invaders that crashed during flight were prone to fires, especially invaders carrying hundreds of gallons of extra fuel. One might assume that if the plane did catch fire upon impact, surely it would have burned through some of the surrounding jungle, or at least left a plume of smoke to mark its location. There is one other possibility, albeit purely hypothetical. The ferry tanks that the planes used contained a 675-gallon, non-self-sealing tank. If there was any sort of ignition of the fuel in this tank, it could have caused the plane to explode into a fireball mid-flight. This would answer the question about why the crew never sent a mayday and why no wreckage was ever found. It could also explain the difficulty in finding the wreck. Much of the fuel would have burned off or been spread out during the explosion and thus not burned for very long. The smaller fragments of the plane could also have passed through the canopy of trees more easily without leaving signs, thus obscuring their location. I want to stress that this is purely speculation on my part and is simply one explanation that fits the few facts that we do know. To this date, I have not heard of these specific fuel tanks on these invaders exploding. However, there are a number of other planes that have exploded mid-flight due to a fuel tank leak. Perhaps most famously in the United States was EWA Flight 800, which exploded shortly after takeoff from JFK Airport on July 17, 1996, killing all 230 people aboard. There was at least two other widely publicized fuel tank explosions as well, one in 1990 and another in 2001. None of these should be taken as proof that this is definitely what happened, but merely as a suggestion that one would be remiss not to at least consider this outcome. This leaves us with two hypotheses. The first one, engine failure, is statistically likely, but leaves many unanswered questions. The other one, a fuel tank explosion, is unlikely, but does explain all of the questions neatly. There's also a possibility of some other explanation that neither of these take into account, but nothing should be considered as definitive without further evidence. Whatever actually happened to this plane is anyone's guess, and unless a wreck can be found or contemporary eyewitness accounts from locals in Brazil can be identified, we may never know for certain what happened to 4322424, First Lieutenant Grimes, First Lieutenant Dingwall, or Sergeant Smith. If you happen to live in Brazil and you're watching this video, please feel free to check the newspaper archives to see if anything is mentioned about this plane or a wreck that was found in that area. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please give me a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe for more Invader videos.